Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Cessna 208. We're currently down here in Queenstown, New Zealand. It's absolutely beautiful. It kind of reminds me of Middle Earth for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. And basically we're going to be flying this aircraft that was designed to be kind of like a big old utility truck with a gigantic engine, great short field performance, as well as these gigantic tires, which will make sure that when we crash land, the crash landing becomes a good landing. So there's a couple quirks between this aircraft and the real-world aircraft as far as different systems goes. I was able to track down a POH for this aircraft, and it was a very interesting read trying to understand all the different systems and how they interact. And the nice thing about this particular version of the Cessna that they gave us is that this is the bigger, more powerful version. This is not the classic version that you're probably all very familiar with. This thing is powered by a turboprop engine. It's a Pratt & Whitney PT6. It's a pretty solid engine. Gives 700 horsepower. It's supposed to be flat rated, but I'll be commenting on that in a little while. Why it kind of is flat rated, but it kind of isn't. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. First things first, pretty straightforward. We're just going to click on the battery switch. You're going to get a big angry dinging noise as soon as you do that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and flip on our beacon light, which is going to let everybody around us know that you started. Go flipping up to above our heads, we have two fuel switches. We're going to make sure both of these are set to the on position. If you're worried about traveling high, obviously you turn your oxygen on, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure our mixture control is off, our propeller control is all the way forward, and our throttle is at 0. That doesn't mean full reverse. That just means just like it is right now. And you want to absolutely make sure this mixture control is shut off. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to swing over to this side. We're going to set our fuel boost pump to the on position. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and flip on our avionics. Now, in the real world, you'd only be using one of these avionic displays, and it'll give you half of everything. But unfortunately, because of the way I have this set up in a mod that I have, we're going to have to use both screens in order to safely see these two numbers right here. Now, the starting procedure is super duper simple. All we're going to do is we're going to click this to the on position. Once we show that we have enough RPM here, it basically peaks out. We're then gently going to bring in the fuel mixture in order to actually get everything running on its own. Once it's running on its own, we're then going to push the mixture kind of up the rest of the way and then shut off the starter. Let's go ahead and do it. Starter the on position. You can see immediately these numbers start waking up. Normally, based on what the manuals say, you want to get this right around 14 or so before you go ahead and engage it. You can see I'm crossing that 10% line right there. It's going to just about peak right there. So now what I'm gently going to do is go ahead and push the mixture control forward. You don't have to push it forward hard. You just need to give it kind of a gentle little tug. And as soon as you do that, you can watch my ITT, which is going to be my interstage turbine temperature. It begins to go up. Our RPM starts to go up on its own. Of course, our torque starts to go up. You can see the propeller starts rotating. We're now in great shape. At this point, of course, you can actually shut off the starter. We don't need it anymore. The engine is more than capable of running on its own. And now we're at what they call low idle. Now, turboprops have a unique setup here as far as fuel systems goes. If we actually were to pull this and put this at about the half position, what we would be at is what they call low idle. The engine oh, sorry there, buddy. Okay, I guess he's going to give us a little push here, but that's fine. I'm not worried about it. At low idle, that engine's not going terribly. Okie dokie. Cool. At low idle, the engine's going to be rotating just enough to kind of keep us going. Now, if I grab this and I bring it all the way up to full power, our engine's actually going to accelerate even though my throttle has not been touched. This enables you to actually taxi the aircraft without touching the throttle. You'll sometimes hear this called the beta range. Let's go ahead and now get ourselves going backwards here. The airport we're going to be, I should say the runway we're going to be interested in using is going to be right over here. Basically going to be backing ourselves up and kind of spinning around on it. Shouldn't be too much work for us. Do a classic back taxi, nothing like that. All right, buddy, you got us just about where we need to be. I appreciate everything. Let's go ahead and get everything else set up now that we're kind of getting going here. I'll set my CDI to GPS mode. I'll go ahead and set my initial altitude, which is going to be a total of, let's see here, right, zoom in a little bit. We'll go ahead and set our altitude to our first altitude, which is going to be 5,000 feet. That looks pretty good right there. I always like to go ahead and don't touch the yaw damper. I always like to go ahead and make sure everything else is all kind of preset. I'll turn on the flight director. I'll turn on the navigation mode. I'll arm which climb method we're going to be using. In this case, I'm going to be using a flight level climb mode, and we're going to be using a speed of 105 knots. That gets us going up at a pretty smooth speed. Now, this aircraft works best if you set it up with these 2 notches of flaps during takeoff. So now that I've been released by that little guy who chopped himself up in my propeller, I'm going to go ahead and slap in those initial things of flaps right now. Woo! Grab route 1. That's right. In this version, I apologize. In this version, we're just going to set it to 50%. In the old days, you actually had an extra notch right there, depending what version. Okay, release my brake. And we're just going to give it just enough thrust to get this thing running around on its own. Delightful. All right, let's do it to it. Okay, taxiing this aircraft. If you treat it just like it's a gigantic Cessna 172, you probably are not far off as far as what you're going to need to do to get this thing around. So I'm going to go ahead and bring myself around nice and slowly. Again, be quick on the brakes. If you're worried about going too fast, you can always reduce the idle. Again, if I were to grab this idle and set this to the 50% position, I won't have nearly as fast or as aggressive as a taxiing situation because the engine will be physically turning slower. Keep in mind, I have not touched my throttle yet. This aircraft just wants to go if you will go ahead and leave that setting as its own. Again, feel free to go ahead and back that throttle up. By the way, you can adjust your throttle with the engine and the low idle without any damage to the turboprop. Like I said, you're not going to do much damage to it, so don't worry about it too bad. It's designed to do that. So we're basically going to choo-choo just a little bit further here. Again, we're trying to take off. I'm going directly to my left here. Get myself a little bit closer here. We can probably do a midfield takeoff, but we're going to go ahead and go all the way because we can. Easy on the brakes. Can't get over how tiny these taxiways are. This is like driving around in Italy. Oh my. Okay. Nice. Can you imagine a 737 trying to get through this little tiny thing? Now here you got to be very cautious. The temptation to go ripping along on this taxiway is going to be very real. Now because we're at the high idle setting right now, it's not unusual for this thing to really start picking up quite a bit of speed. That's going to get us going a little bit too fast for what we safely want to be doing here. All right. Keep going here. See somebody coming the other way. Chief, the landing runways. That was a tree. Got myself scared over nothing. Now, one really cool trick that I recommend anybody does in this flight simulator is to have the time acceleration button handy, because you can actually use it to time accelerate your taxiing. Of course, when you do that, you want to be careful that you don't accidentally over-time accelerate. There we go. Success! Yeah, we probably should have died. Yeah, I know. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop on the runway. We're going to flip on our landing lights. We have two of them. We can also use our middle light as well. Takeoff on this thing is a little tricky because we have to be really, really careful with the engine that we don't over-rev it or we don't overheat it. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to sit here. I've got my brakes kind of held gently. I'm going to go ahead and push the throttle forward. We want to peak our torque.
Red 6-4 cleared for takeoff runway 23 south, departure approved.
Get ready on the throttle because this thing reacts very slowly.
Cleared.
All right, I notice that my ITT is in the white, which means our maximum takeoff torque today is going to be right as I have set it now. So basically, you need to make sure everything stays in the green, but not too far into the white. So I'm going to go ahead and release the accelerator. I should say release the brake, not the accelerator. There's no accelerator on this thing. You're going to want to be lifting the nose up right around 65, 70 knots. Seems to work fairly well, at least at one notch of flaps. Lift up the nose nice and gently. And the aircraft comes up on its own. Now you have to resist the urge to press the flaps up button. All right, we're going to establish an attitude of about 7.5 degrees. And we're going to want to be climbing, like I said, at about 105 knots. Gets you going. Once we're clear of the runway and we're clear of any sort of obstacles, we can go ahead and bring up that notch of flaps right away. Now, this is a sticky situation because if I start turning the aircraft, I could potentially slam right into that mountain to my right. Looking over here on my left, I've got the exact same sort of situation going on. So what you try to do is you try to get the best of both worlds. Again, while maintaining about that 105 knots or so. Again, you're going to need a lot of trim. These have very heavy controls. I'm basically going to fly myself a modified teardrop pattern. I'm going to kind of go over this way, and then I'm going to bring the aircraft aggressively in the other direction as I continue to climb. Note, as we start to climb, your power settings are going to start changing because of the fact this aircraft is based on air. And of course, as we all know, the higher we go, the less air there is. So that's going to immediately have an impact on this aircraft's performance. But again, you got to keep your hand on your throttle. You can see how my ITT on my bottom right corner is at 745. I can pull my throttle back just a little tiny bit. My flaps are up, by the way, in case you're not sure. This is a bit of a steep turn, given that there might be passengers on board, and you need just a little bit more rudder than I'm giving it, but we'll do ahead and fix that in a second. All right, give myself a handy-dandy little spiral. Trying to get a little bit of altitude while I'm in a protected zone. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There we are. Nice. That was well done. Okay. I'm going to pull the nose back up again. Give yourselves a couple blasts of trim. Again, aircraft like this, it's almost safer to hand fly them initially than it is to kind of let the autopilot do it. It's not to say that you can't. It's just to say that you certainly should just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to I'm going to give it just a little bit more torque here. Again, I'm pushing the throttle gently forward, trying to get just on the edge of too much torque and just on the edge of too much ITT. How do I know? I can see that my torque right now is still in the green, and my ITT is still in the green, and my NG is still in the green as well. So we're in great shape here. All right, pull that nose up. We're doing about 120, but I don't really want to fly this aircraft any steeper than this, because if I do so, it's going to be tremendously uncomfortable for your passengers. Now, here's an interesting problem. How do we solve this? Basically, what we're going to have to do is follow the edge of that mountain range and then come back over this top of it. We can't just point directly at this mountain range and go. If we try to do that, we're going to end up being one with the mountain, and that's not the kind of one with the mountain you want to be.
Squawk 263, 1 red, 64.
All right, bringing ourselves around. Getting really careful here.
Contact 1 mile east of Queenstown.
There we are.
4,100 feet.
Nice. This particular airport, by the way, Queenstown, has an amazing RNAV approach. It basically takes you through this entire mountain range, and then you have to come back through it in order to safely land it. It's an absolutely wild experience if you're ever looking for something a little bit more challenging. I think 5,000 feet is a little bit too limited there. I'm actually going to keep going a little higher here. Probably take ourselves up to 6,500. All right, looking pretty good so far. Again, I'm flying this by hand because it's just simpler. Keep an eye on your torque as well as your temperatures. I'm not trying to jerk myself over those mountains yet. You may actually need a little bit of aileron trim on this aircraft. By the way, now that we've gotten up to a safe altitude, it's a good idea to go ahead and flip on the yaw damper. The yaw damper, more than anything, is for the comfort of the passengers. It's going to stop you from doing one of these things when you're really, really bad weather. But for us, we're just going to kind of leave it in that default position and kind of go through. All right, we'll cut across this mountain range in just a moment. It looks like we've got just enough altitude underneath me. Again, when you're planning this flight in the real world, you'd want to be incredibly careful here, because if we do this too aggressively or not aggressively enough, we're going to end up eating dirt in the bad way. Pull the nose up just a teeny tiny bit. Again, notice I'm in the red now. I'm going to back my throttle back just a teeny tiny bit. In the real world, of course, as you get higher and higher, the air gets thinner and thinner. The torque goes down, not up. I've addressed this in other videos before, and I believe the good folks out there are already starting to work on it directly, so that won't be an issue in the future. There we are. Wow, look at the size of these mountains. That is impressive. That is really, really impressive. Again, where I live, you get mountains that, oh, it's 1,000 feet tall, and it's like about as nice as you get, so. All right, I think we're just about clear of that mountain right there. It's looking pretty darn good. We're just about ready to start setting up our cruise. We naturally could have gone the back side of the valley as well, but I thought this would be a more dramatic approach to do. All right, looking pretty good here, looking pretty good. Got our warning that we just crossed over 6,500 feet, but like I said, I want to get a little bit of altitude under us. Imagine trying to drive a car through here. That'd be crazy. I'm just glad we're flying. But again, you can see very clearly just how much performance this aircraft has. And if this were the older version, I'd probably pick a different flight because it'd be much, much safer than trying to choo-choo through here. All right, looks like 7,500 feet is going to be a safe altitude for us. Flip on off my landing lights. I'll need to run them the whole time. No reason to. No, things are looking pretty good so far. 7,500. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and nose over. Now, cruise. This aircraft has kind of a unique cruise. For those of you familiar with the TBM, you have a pretty good idea of what you can do. Basically, you can put the power all the way up to what your particular torque setting is. So in this case, if our max torque is 2,300 pound-feet, we can just literally set it to there and just leave it alone. You wouldn't even have to come back and start tweaking a little bit later on if you didn't want to. Down to about 7,500 feet. Power looks pretty good. There are a couple options as far as doing reduced power cruises. I'm personally a fan of using a maximum power cruise, but there is one thing that I do a little differently, and that's the fact that I'll intentionally reduce the RPM to cut down on the noise of the aircraft a little bit. Interesting fact is this is a turboprop, and of course, not the most thick soundproofing in the world, which makes it a bit of a loud experience for anybody who's got to actually experience it, which is kind of rough. I'm going to go ahead and press the outboard mode. I'll flip on the automatic pilot. And the aircraft should start bringing us down. So let's go ahead and get ourselves set up. So the way this works is I have my big fat blue handle. In this case, it's going to be this one on the back here. Now, if I start pulling that backwards, I'm going to do it very, very gently, you'll you'll notice my torque comes down, and then it comes up just a teeny tiny bit. It's basically bouncing. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce my RPM to about 1,800 or so. What that's going to do is it's going to reduce the noise in the cabin, but it's not going to have any effect whatsoever on my cruise speed. Now I'm noticing I'm still in the green both on torque, and that's backwards, it should be pound-feet, both in torque as well as ITT. If I want to do a maximum performance cruise, I can actually increase the throttle to get this going even higher. But again, I cannot cross that magical line here. I cannot cross that. I just did it. And of course, I can't cross that line here. So now we're basically on cruise mode. Now it's simply a matter of flying to our destination. Destination isn't terribly far away. As you can see, we've got about 9 minutes to go before we hit it. The only thing that makes our destination very, very tricky today is the fact that it is a dirt strip and is at the absolute minimum / maximum limit of this aircraft's landing distance. So it should be fairly challenging for us once we do get there. Stay tuned.
Frequency
All right, we're about 5 minutes away from the ground at this point. Nothing quite like a teleport in there. I always kind of like that feature.
New Zealand.
Yeah, we're moving pretty darn fast though, so I'm just checking my time to make sure it makes sense. It's good.
Luna
We got the window. All right, so now we got to start descending. So the airport we're flying into is a grass strip, and it is not the world's largest grass strip either, as you'll see once we actually get there. Now, our problem we're going to have here is if we just start descending now, we're basically going to clip the edge of this. Now, there's a huge valley on the opposite side that basically we're trying to get our aircraft over down into so that we can safely land it moments later. So I'm just going to kind of do some quick planning here. I'm going to go do some mental calculations. Now, you can hear my co-pilot basically working over real quickly, trying to get some flight following and all that other good stuff. We could have flown in, of course, to NZLX up here, but we chose to do something a little bit more challenging, just because I like challenging. All right, so we're going to start a very, very gentle descent. Basically, I want to be 1,000 feet over the edge of this ridge here. So I'm going to go ahead and dial in my altitude that I like to fly down to. Let's say I want to go about 5,000 feet or so. I'm going to go ahead and select my mode, in this case, vertical speed, down, 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 down. We want about 500 feet per minute. As soon as you do that, you're going to want to go ahead and reduce your torque as well with the big black handle here, so that we keep just about the same speed we were flying at a minute ago. We could do this as a flight level change, but it's just easier to do it here. Now, you're probably saying, well, can I reduce the RPM on the engine even more? Absolutely. If you want to make this thing really, really quiet, you can pull this blue handle back pretty darn far, and you're not really going to do any real damage. And again, it's not going to affect your cruise speed nearly as much as it would have been, especially the older generations of this particular aircraft. Okay, so now we're going to descend. We're trying to clip the edge of this cliff. If you're looking for a neat little trick here, you can actually see using the synthetic vision roughly what we're pointing at, and you can see roughly where the edge of that cliff is. In this case, I could probably get away with an even faster descent so that I get a little bit closer. But remember, we want a little bit of room above that cliff as well. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my descent speed here. Whoops. I've only done that 1,000 times. Keep in mind, as your descent speed increases, so does your airspeed, so you want to go ahead and back the throttle back a little bit as well. We're trying to maintain as consistent a speed as possible. Now, if you take a look at my synthetic vision, you can see very clearly that I'm just going to be nipping the edge of that valley, which is going to get us coming down very effectively. Now, when we actually get there, wait until you see how not big this runway is, which again is why we picked it. This particular Cessna 208 is equipped with a thrust reverser. By thrust reverser, it just means that it literally takes the propeller and twists it the other direction. To use that, we're going to have to pull the throttle all the way to the back, press the button on our joystick to activate reverse, and then push the throttle back forward again. You want to be cautious using that, by the way, in the real world on grass strips, because it tends to suck in everything. So if there's any loose like gravel, or there's dirt or something like that, a couple of rocks, it's just going to make a disaster of our propeller. And these propellers are, $50, $60, $70,000 a piece. So kind of keep that in the back of your head as well. All right, taking a quick little look here. Looks like we've done a really, really nice job. We're going to be crossing the edge of that ridge at exactly the altitude I was hoping to cross it at. You can see we're about 11 nautical miles away. We're going to be landing to the south. It's runway 18. As I always recommend, I highly suggest you go ahead and set up your appropriate landing position on your HSI. So in this case, I've dialed in the correct runway heading that we're going to be on, so I know that when I cross into the valley, I'm just going to be taking a gentle right turn in order to go ahead and put me down on the ground. About 3 minutes or so to get down. I think it'll be coming pretty quick. You cannot miss where this runway is. It's obvious, but at the same time, it's not terribly long. So we're going to have to come in basically by the numbers, which I kind of like this aircraft. It's pretty easy to fly. Some things you want to check on your way down, of course. You want to make sure your transponder's been set correctly. Of course, in this aircraft, it's a G1000, so it's going to be all inside of here. If we were going to do a timer or something like that, we could have set that all up earlier, but again, we're not worried about that. We're not doing any crazy instrument approaches or anything like that. We just want to kind of keep it simple. Oh man, look at this. These mountains are just tremendous. I can't wait to see this in VR. I was reading something the other day that some of the early progress they're making towards it, and apparently it's coming. But again, try do VR in like the 787. I don't think any computer can possibly manage a good frame rate with that though. Alright, I can see a distinctive shape of a track down here in the valley. You can see that the river here cuts through very, very, very deeply. Yeah, again, this is real world weather. It's a little hazy today, probably a little on the warmer side too, because again, this would be the summer. Or I should say this would be the spring. And there's our destination. See it? Like I said, there's not much to it. All right, now that we're about 1,000 feet off the ground, I'm actually going to increase my descent rate, and I'm going to decrease the altitude which I want to be at. So basically what we're doing is we're doing nap of Earth here. There we go. Just want to hold this very steady, right about there. Keep an eye on your indicated airspeed, however. We're getting very close to the barber pole. All right, there we are. Nice. I've always wanted to visit New Zealand. The farthest I've ever gotten personally is out to Australia. I went to Melbourne and kind of visited some of those different places out that way. That was a lot of fun. That was really, really cool. People there are so much more far relaxed than some of the folks that I know on a daily basis. It's a cultural thing, I think. Down, I can actually decrease my speed a lot here, because I'm going to have to kind of angle downwards in order to safely get this thing down. Keep in mind, as we slow down, my descent rate is not going to change, but how far I travel as I descend will start to change. All right, start getting myself all nice and lined up there. Looking for this little thing right here. You can see, like I said, it's not a lot of runway. And for the one time that I almost always fly a proper traffic pattern, this will be a time I do not, because I'd rather take the time to set myself up. Because really what I want to do is kind of come across the valley and kind of do one of these things to sort of line myself up. Again, this is much simpler because I already set my HSI to my correct direction that runway is going to exist. This is so amazing. These are, again, places I've always wanted to visit in the real world, kind of thing, as I mentioned a minute ago. Yeah, there's our runway. You can see it pretty distinctively. Alright, we're going to come swing around to the left a little bit. I'm actually going to kick off the automatic pilot. I like how it makes a little boo noise. It's like somebody's coming in to, come eat. Alright, we shall cheat just a teeny tiny bit. I love cheating. I always think like instantly Indiana Jones music whenever I accelerate time, because it's like traveling by map kind of a thing. Alright, go ahead and take a look at the window. I think everybody knows what that is right there. Nice. All right, there is our destination. Okay, time to start getting this thing ready to land. So this aircraft is pretty easy to land. Like I said, it's like a big Cessna 182 or 172. We can go ahead and throw down our flaps once we get less than 150 knots. We're less than 150 knots now. We're going to go ahead and pop that first notch of flaps down. As soon as you do that, of course, your controls are going to get a little less sensitive. Nose is going to lift itself up very aggressively. You're going to want to compensate that. Giving a little bit of downward trim. Alright, go ahead and swing to our right just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put that next notch of flaps in because I want to get that really, really, really high drag now. So now we want to get our aircraft down to about 80-85 knots. It's going to be a pretty appropriate approach speed. We're a little on the high side, but that's not going to affect us too much here. Looking pretty good, looking pretty good. You're not going to have to fly a slip or anything silly like that. Looking pretty good, looking pretty good. All right, there's the runway. Not a lot to it, but hey, it's good enough for us. All right. Now, this aircraft's actually small enough that if you wanted to put it in a slip or something like that, you totally could without really any consequence.
November Zulu.
All right.
X-ray traffic red 64 is on final runway 18 to land.
Ha! They're not wrong.
Great.
All right. Here we go. Again, you want about 80 knots, 85, somewhere right in there. Fortunately for us, we're going just a little on the fast side, but nothing bad's got to come about it. There we go, 85 knots. Go ahead and give it a little bit of thrust. Make sure your propeller RPM is back in the correct position before you try to set down on the ground here. And get a little bit slower. Runway's looking pretty good. Of course, when you land on grass, you want to do it as gently as possible. But in the real world, the second you touch the grass, it's ka-junk. There we go. Go ahead and flip on our reverser. Hold down the brakes. Feel the reverser. And we are here. Delightful. All right, folks, hopefully you found this video helpful. Again, I just wanted to give you a basic overview of this aircraft as well as the startup procedure. Shutting this thing down, by the way, is the easiest thing in the world. You just go ahead and grab the red handle and pull it all the way back, and the engine will immediately start dying on you. And, there's no magic key you have to push or anything like that. Securing the aircraft is pretty simple. You just go ahead and shut off your avionics, and just like that, we're good to go. Enjoy.